also hosts multiple podcasts such as the Keto Edge Summit and the Fasting Transformation Summit. His work has been seen on popular media such as ABC, Fox News, and the Dr. Oz Show. Dr. Jockers is passionate and committed to what he does, which is helping people with disease prevention, among other things, through nutrition. Please help me in welcoming Dr. David Jockers.
Thanks so much, guys. It's an honor to be out here, and I love live events like this. I actually haven't done a live event in about a year. I've been on like a little sabbatical trying to raise kids and be a dad. So real quick, guys, why doesn't everybody just stand up? And I know I was sitting there for a while and I was like, oh, I just need to stand up. So why don't we stand up and bring your arms up like this. You don't hit the person next to you, make sure you get enough room. What we're gonna do is just a couple posture exercises, okay? So we're gonna do this right here. There we go. Good. Good, that's the hummingbird. And now you're gonna bring your hands right back here. You're just gonna kind of do some retraction. Okay, so you're gonna bring your head back like that. There you go, okay? Now let's just reach up like this. All right, cool. All right, you guys can go ahead and sit down. Did that feel good? Yeah. Good, excellent. Okay, so go ahead and go to the next slide there. So this is really the reason why I don't do a whole lot of events, right? And why, if you saw me, I came in a little bit late. I didn't sleep in. Okay, I've been up for quite a while, 5:30, but I was giving these boys a bath and letting mommy sleep in a little bit because we got a little joyful. She just turned 9 months old. And so at this stage, she's like crawling everywhere. We gotta barricade her. You know, the boys are 3, twins, identical twins, 3 years old. So they're all over the place, running around like crazy. And, you know, I'm just so grateful that my wife gave me permission to come out here because I love doing this, but I've got to get permission from her first. So thanks so much, Angel. All right, go to the next slide. So Amy gave a great presentation on insulin, and obviously when we're talking about low carb, we have to talk about insulin and blood sugar. And we know insulin's jobs. One of its main jobs, like she was saying, is take sugar out of the bloodstream, get it into the cells. See, when you have elevated blood sugar, like if you don't have enough insulin, which is probably not the problem here, but if you don't have enough insulin, or if you're type 2 diabetic, type 1 diabetic, okay, type 2 that is no longer able to produce enough or respond to it, then you get this elevation in sugar molecules, and those sugar molecules, glucose, bind to proteins, and they create something called an advanced glycolytic enzyme. So when we look at that, advanced starts with the A, glycolytic starts with the G, and enzyme starts with the E. A-G-E. What do you think that does to you? Ages you, right? So insulin actually is trying to help us, trying to save our lives, because these AGEs are really, you know, they are really destructive. They're going to damage all the tissues around us. And they're like shrapnel going through the kidneys, okay? Just really damaging the kidneys. So we produce insulin, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide there. And insulin's job, again, is to take the sugar out of the bloodstream. However, when we've got elevated insulin, we're gonna end up storing body fat. Now go to the next slide there. Now insulin does a lot more than that, okay? One of the things insulin does is it elevates certain things like the inflammasome, which is a genetic pathway that amplifies inflammation throughout the body. So rather than localized inflammation, like if you were to sprain your ankle or get a cut or a wound or something like that, okay? In our house we call it a boo-boo, right? So rather than a boo-boo, that's a localized area of inflammation. You get this amplification of inflammation throughout the whole body. So the whole body's saying, we need lots of inflammation. We need inflammation here. Why is that? Because our ancestors, whenever they ate, of course, they had an elevation in insulin, just like us. But when they ate food, it wasn't sterilized. You know, oftentimes we're eating sterilized food, and so when we take in bacteria and microorganisms, inflammation helps keep the microbial load down and under control, because systemic infections or infections that got into our bloodstream and spread throughout our body have killed more people in the history of mankind than anything else. So in order to prevent against that, the body elevates inflammation. Inflammation is an adaptation that we've made, that mankind has made, in order to prevent against systemic infections. Does anybody know anybody that has died from bubonic plague? Bubonic plague, anybody? No, right? But yet that killed half the world. What was that, 600 years ago, 500 years ago, something like that? So we adapted, and this inflammatory process is how we've adapted, and insulin is a key player in that. Obviously, though, in our society, we have lots of food, right? Food is prevalent. We can literally spend all day long eating. Like, I got enough food in my house, I don't need to go anywhere. I could just eat 24/7 for, for a week before I run out of food. So we've got plenty of food around, so we don't need this constant stimulus for inflammation. We obviously need to reduce that. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So, of course, we know that, when insulin's elevated, okay, then we're going to store fat. However, when we are fasting, okay, or if we're eating this sort of low-carb, high-fat, well-formulated ketogenic diet, our body's going to start to use dietary fat and also our body fat to produce energy. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So no insulin available, or really I should say low levels of insulin. And what's going to happen, we're going to end up using our own body fat for energy. Who wants to be a lean, mean, fat-burning machine? Who wants to do that? All of us, right? Go ahead and go to the next slide there. So what else does a ketogenic, well-formulated ketogenic diet do for us? Well, we talked about it. It reduces inflammation. Like for me, I'm what's called a ectomorph, right? So there's 3 body types. Endomorph is somebody who, they look at a carb and they gain weight. Anybody relate with that, right? Like Jimmy that's here, you'd be an endomorph body type. There's the mesomorph, which is the bodybuilder. Like, do you know anybody that they eat whatever they want and they look ripped? They just have this great physique to them. That's the mesomorph. And then you've got the ectomorph. I'm the ectomorph, which is basically I can eat whatever I want, okay? And, I just stay very, very thin, narrow shoulders. I've been told I'm too skinny, like, all my life, basically. And, so I'm the ectomorph. However, my grandfather was an ectomorph, and he had type 2 diabetes. He developed type 2 diabetes. And if I were to consume a higher carbohydrate diet, I wouldn't get fat. I would be skinny fat. I would have a higher percentage of body fat. In fact, I wouldn't be able to maintain my muscle mass. So I'm about 165 pounds now, really strong. I would probably drop down to probably 145 or so. I'd probably drop 20 pounds of muscle, but my body fat percentage, because I maintain somewhere around 8% body fat, you can see every striation, I'd probably be more like 14, 15% body fat. And I would not be able to think, I'd have no energy, I'd be chronically fatigued, and I would develop diabetes and probably dementia, Alzheimer's, or some sort of neurological issue. In fact, my grandmother unfortunately recently passed. She was about 80, she was 87, but she had dementia. And so that runs in my family, so obviously I would develop that, and probably cancer. So this is what happens. It affects us in all these different areas, but a ketogenic diet can dramatically reduce that. I know for myself, I feel the best when I'm fasting, okay, or eating 1 to 2 meals a day. When I am eating, I feel absolutely amazing. And so go ahead and go to the next one now. How many of you guys know somebody that has started a ketogenic diet and they felt awful? Raise your hand, okay? Probably most of us. As a doctor, I'm a huge advocate. If you've been to my website, I have lots of articles, my social media, and I hear this from a lot of people. Like, I started a ketogenic diet and it was like, I had to pass out. I felt like I was going to pass out. I felt awful. Whatever it is. My hair started falling out. So I hear this all the time. And there are 3 common causes of keto side effects. Keto side effects, I don't know if that's the best term, okay? But 3 major things that can cause somebody to feel like crap when they're on a ketogenic diet. One is hypoglycemia. So blood sugar drops too low, and they don't have the ketones to support their brain. So when your sugar drops down, you don't have the ketones, you're not going to feel good. HPA axis dysfunction. Raise your hand if you know that term, okay? Most of you guys are like, what does that mean, okay? It basically means the brain's not communicating well to the part of our body that helps create energy, like our adrenals, helps drive up brain function, allows us to think sharply and quickly and perform. And then the last one is the electrolyte imbalance, all right? And so let's go to the next slide there. So there's a big difference between hypoglycemia and keto or fat adapted here. And so basically, when we look at labs, they can be somewhat similar in some ways, like your fasting blood sugar. So if, like right now, my fasting blood sugar was probably, I didn't test it this morning, it was probably in the 70s. Now, years ago, before I was keto adapted, if my blood sugar got in the 70s, I would feel irritable, I'd feel hangry, I'd like want to take a bite out of my arm. You know, I'd feel awful. And for some people, they get nauseous, some people, they get very dizzy, they've got to lay down, they've got all these different issues. Whereas when you're keto adapted, when your blood sugar's in your 70s, you feel great because you've got the ketones, and ketones are those amazing molecules that can cross through the blood-brain barrier and provide a fuel for your brain. If you don't have the ketones elevated in your system, the brain's going to panic because the brain has got to have a steady source of energy. And if it doesn't have that steady source of energy, then it's going to panic. It's going to elevate stress hormones, and it's extremely stressful and challenging on the body when we have hypoglycemic episodes. As opposed to when we're fat adapted, we keep that blood sugar down, we feel great, you know, you'll see changes in things like your hemoglobin A1C and things like that. So let's go to the next slide. So keto flu, okay, so here are 7 ways to prevent it. Number 1, back off carbs slowly. This is important for some people. Some people can drop carbs immediately and feel great results. How many of you guys did that? Raise your hand if you just dropped carbs. It was like one day you ate, you know, cereal for breakfast, peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch, pasta and pizza for dinner, like I did growing up. And then the next day you were like, okay, I'm doing keto, and you completely dropped all those carbs and you felt great, like within a week. Who did that? Raise your hand. So some of you guys can do that. That's amazing, and I love it because it's so much easier to get your body healthy and improve your insulin sensitivity. Some people can't do that. In fact, a major diet change is a stress on the body. Even if it's a healthy diet change, it's still a stressor. Stress just means change, basically, and our body's got to adapt to it. We need stress in our life. Stress is critical. We're always talking about how we need less stress, and for many of us we do, but to some degree we need stress. Exercise is stress, right? Changing your diet is a stress. Some people just need to slowly and gradually adapt into that. Slowly move into that, and I'll show you how to do that. Increase your fat intake, of course. You know, it's a healthy, high-fat diet, so we start to slowly drop the carbs, start to increase fat, we start to increase salt and water intake. We get some exercise, get some movement, try to reduce other stresses in our lives, right? And if all else fails, you know, we can increase our carb intake, and I'll show you how and why to do that. So let's go to the next slide. So Amy already touched on this, but basically when we have high insulin, we retain sodium. When insulin goes down, like we're on a low-carb diet, we start excreting these electrolytes, and our body's got to adapt to that too. It's got to adapt to retaining a little bit more of these. So in the beginning, you actually oftentimes need more sodium, more trace minerals. And you can get these things through your diet and obviously salting your foods to your desired intake. So let's go to the next slide there. So how many of you guys would say you are a experienced ketogenic dieter? Raise your hand if you're experienced. So looks like about half. How many guys would say you're new to this? It's pretty new for you. Okay, so good. So I'm going to show you how to do this for both of you guys. So for a keto novice, the first thing I tell people to do, and I'm like, you know, people think, especially my patients, they think I'm a food Nazi. Like I'll see them in Whole Foods and they're like hiding there. They're like, oh hey, don't look here, you know. So I kind of, a lot of people are intimidated because I'm you know, really passionate and also been applying these principles. And I'm a purist, so I apply these principles. I've been applying these principles for 15 years. However, meeting my wife really changed my whole perspective because our first date, I was telling her, I'm like, oh yeah, this restaurant here, they've got grass-fed beef. And she was like, don't all cows eat grass? But I had to educate her on that, but, you know, had to change her ways. But she's an amazing woman. So the keto novice is this, is that basically I tell them the first week, okay, we're not all I want you to do is actually count around how many carbohydrates, look at your food, count how much carbohydrates you are consuming on a daily basis, on a typical daily basis. And use up, I actually tell them this, I say, use up all those high carb foods. Show them the food list, use up all these high carb foods that you have in your house. The reason why I tell them that is because not everybody's super motivated. Now, actually I should say I don't tell everybody that. Typically I'll tell them to go out and get real foods. However, I've had a number of people that have said, well, you know, I'm gonna do that next week because I've got all this bread and cereal and whatnot in my house and I don't want to throw it out, I want to use it up, okay? And they're like afraid to tell me that, but I know that's what they're gonna do. So ideally, go out and get more real foods, right? Change over to real foods. And for certainly the first meal, ideally your breakfast and your lunch. Okay, well first off, we're gonna make sure you're not eating late night, meals, and we're gonna do 12 hours. I call it the simple fast between your last meal and your first meal. So if you finish dinner at 7 p.m., you wouldn't touch anything with calories till 7 a.m. Easy, right? Simple, okay? However, a lot of people love that late night ice cream or whatever it is. So we get them off of that. And then I tell them, in the morning when you first wake up, make sure you start your day with water. Before you ever think about food, start with water. We have a hunger center and a thirst center in a part of our brain called the hypothalamus. So right next to each other, food naturally gives us a dopamine hit, meaning we feel good. We feel good when we eat, and that's a great thing. That motivates us as a species to drive for food, to eat food, keeps us alive. However, we don't want to constantly get that dopamine hit. Water gives us less of a dopamine hit. How many of you guys just feel absolutely amazing and just absolutely incredible when you take a drink of water, as opposed to ice cream? Okay, yeah, I didn't think so. Some of you guys have been doing this a long time, like me. Like I love drinking water. Okay, but for most people they'd say that's pretty boring. But you drink water, and what that's going to do is actually going to help balance certain hormones like ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone, and that's going to suppress your appetite in the morning, which makes it easier for you to go a little bit longer in the morning without needing food. And that's important because that gets that insulin down just a little bit. And then your first meal, we want to start lower carb, high fat. What I found is that when people start their day with something like oatmeal or cereal or something like that, waffles, pancakes, whatever, one of those types of things, high carb foods, when they start their day like that, it ends up creating a roller coaster of cravings. How many of you guys have experienced that? Raise your hand if you would say you've experienced that. Yeah. So if you start your day with like eggs or like a protein, high fat smoothie, throw like coconut milk or avocado in there or something like that, and you keep the berries out, you're going to notice a lot less of that. A lot less of the cravings, and you're going to be able to go longer. You're actually going to notice, hey, I'm not as hungry. It's lunchtime, but I'm just not quite as hungry. So start out like that. Ideally lunch as well, going very low carb for lunch, and then have a little bit more of the carbs in the evening. Like, so you've got this total carb count, whatever it is, 200 grams or whatever. You're going to have a majority of those in the evening, and it's called carb backloading or calorie backloading. Both these things actually can have some benefit for some individuals. Now, somebody that's very insulin resistant, they're not really going to see a whole lot of results, but they may just notice that their hunger and their cravings go down, and they don't feel bad when they do this. And that's what I've noticed. So that's basically your first week. Then your second week, you take that total carb count, whatever that was, you drop it in half, cut it in half. So if it was 400 grams, you're going to cut it down to 200 grams, okay? And ideally by week 2, we're doing real foods. So, we're off the pastries, we're off the ice cream, all that kind of stuff. And instead, we are going with carrots, sweet potatoes, nutrient-dense, real foods. So we do that for week 2. And then what we do is we take 30 days, and now we get that carb count under 50, and we go into more of that ketogenic stage, right? Somewhere 20 to 50 grams of carbohydrates and we are keto adapting. So this is a little bit less stressful for the body. Now, if somebody is really stress resistant, meaning that they go out for a walk and their hamstrings are sore, okay, that individual may need a little bit more tapering down on carbohydrates. So you kind of have to try to judge their stress sensitivity. If somebody's really overwhelmed by stress in their life, they're tearing up all the time, crying every day, things like that. If they've got a lot of stress and a lot of emotional reactions to stress, they might need to tighter down just a little bit. This is personalized nutrition right here, guys. This isn't cookie cutter, just follow this plan. This has got to be personalized because everybody's different. Everybody's life is different, their stress levels are different, and a good clinician or a good program is going to help somebody tighter this down properly. Now, for those of you guys that are keto experienced, so there's another subset that have done low carb, done keto, and had success with it, but then the holidays come, and they've got all the cakes and goodies and all that kind of stuff, and you come off of it, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, it's the new year, the last month I just trashed my body with all of these carbs. It was a lot of fun, but now I'm feeling the effects of it. How do I keto adapt back? Certainly you could just, night and day, the next day, start very low carb. Or you could try to do, a lot of people at the beginning of the year, they're like, okay, I'm doing a 5-day water fast, starting the day after they partied on New Year's. Okay, and for some people, they're willing to go through the stress and the pain of that adaptation, and that's great if they're able to do that. But for many people, it's just not a really good option. In fact, it can end up creating a feeling of defeat, a lot of discomfort when they're trying to do that, and they may not get the results that they're looking for. So if you go to the next slide, what I'll do is on week 1, we're just going to cut it down in half. Okay, so again, cut those carbs down in half. So if you've spent a month very high carb, cut them down in half, and then week 2, go ahead and go into a ketogenic, a well-formulated ketogenic diet. Does that make sense? Is that helpful for you guys? So this way we can reduce some of the stress that can take place when we do an extreme diet change quickly. Now, let's go, we got to remember, this is a long game. This is about a lifestyle. It's not about how quickly can I drop 50 pounds. Does that make sense? I would much rather somebody follow a sustainable ketogenic lifestyle for 50 years rather than trying to do this quick weight loss approach for 3 months. So this gives somebody a lot more. It's easier transition. Let's go to the next slide. So other things that are really helpful, really hydrating your body well. I find that hydration. I know for me, I hydrate I'm like a camel. I mean, I'm constantly drinking water. I'm drinking gallons of water a day. Hydration to me just really helps me run well. And I find that, really, I think we're really bioelectric beings, meaning that we don't eat for energy. We've all been told that we need to eat for energy. That's not true, because think about Thanksgiving. You eat a lot of food, and then how do you feel an hour after that? Does anybody have a lot of energy after that? No, right? You want to lay down. So you took in all this potential energy, but it's very stressful in the body. You got to use a lot of energy in order to convert that into energy, to usable energy. So as opposed to that, I feel my best when I'm fasting. I'm most energized, my brain is alive. And so water and electrolytes are what conduct neurological energy in your body. So we don't eat for energy, we eat for adaptation and recovery, to provide building blocks so we can recover, build new healthy cells, regenerate our body. But water and electrolytes will give you a lot more energy if you're looking for energy than food will. So we gotta hydrate well. Use a high quality salt. I like Himalayan sea salt, Redmond's real salt, Celtic sea salt, a lot of good ones out there. Also, using magnesium supplementation can be really, really helpful. So how many of you guys are a fan of using magnesium, right? So I find magnesium to be really helpful supplement. Now, if you can't move your bowels, you look for a magnesium oxide, all right? That will help move the bowels. However, if you don't want to spend all day on the toilet, then you go for like a magnesium citrate, glycinate, taurate. There's a whole bunch of different good ones. 3 and 8, which is the one that crosses the blood-brain barrier. Those are good forms. And then eat trace mineral-rich foods. When you eat real foods, and you can go to the next slide, eat real foods. And these ones right here are the best when it comes to trace minerals. You can go to the next slide. These ones are the best when it comes to trace minerals. So these should be a part of your diet, or at least getting a majority of these. There may be something here that you have a food sensitivity to, or there may be something you just don't like. That's fine if you keep that out, but try to get a majority of these. And I would imagine most of you guys, like how many of you guys ate at least 3 of these yesterday? All right? So probably just about everybody here. So make sure that you're getting a lot of these trace mineral-rich foods in your diet when you are eating, and that will really help you. Salt your foods to taste. You don't need to over-salt them, but salt them up to your flavor profile, and that's really helpful as well. Now, let's go ahead and go to the next slide there. Now, this is how we troubleshoot when somebody's having trouble losing weight. A lot of people will tell me things like, I've been on a ketogenic diet for a month, I haven't lost any weight. I gained 2 pounds or whatever. I've been on a ketogenic diet for 6 months. I lost 20 pounds right away, and then now I can't lose any more weight. So there's a couple things that we look at there. Number one, do they really need to lose weight? I mean, sometimes they're actually at their optimal weight. They want to be 18 again, and they're 58, and may not be realistic. Okay, so that's one thing to consider. But you may have 3 individuals, as a doctor, I might have 3 individuals in front of me that are telling me this same story, and I've got to look at them as individual cases. So person A over here may need to tweak their diet. They may not be following the diet right. They may not be actually testing their blood ketones and getting into ketosis. They're like, well, they're high on my urine test, but they're not in their blood. And so how many of you guys have heard that? Well, my ketones are really high on my urine test, but they're not getting results. And so they may not have elevated blood ketones. They may not be in nutritional ketosis. So that's the first thing. It's simple, we just got to tweak the diet. Person B may have underlying thyroid and adrenal issues that are impacting their ability to produce metabolic energy. And that's something we've really got to address, and I'll go into that in just a second. We got to support the thyroid, support the adrenals there. And then person C may actually need more stress. All right? So person B needs less stress. Person C may need more stress. So we've got to hit a certain stress threshold to really move our metabolic machinery. So how do we add more stress? Well, fasting is a stress. So we can do alternate day fasting. One day you eat, next day you don't. Or we might do a 5-day water fast, or we may do 1 meal a day. So that's a stressor on the body that can help trigger more metabolic fat burning. Okay, get that insulin down just a little bit more and stimulate that. We can also do exercise, high intensity training, where we are stimulating growth hormone, increasing our lean body mass, which increases our metabolism. So we might add in some good exercise. We might do temperature change. So how many of you guys are crazy like me and you finish every shower with 60 seconds cold water? Okay? So I was doing that this morning, and while I had my little 9-month-old, Joyful was crawling around, and I'm in the shower. My wife's watching the boys, and they're in the bathtub in the other room. And, I'm pumping. So what I do is I turn it on cold at the end, and I just kind of pump my muscles like this, because it drives circulation. You get this huge endorphin release, huge blast of growth hormones, amazing. So it's uncomfortable at first, of course, but actually embracing the discomfort, or one of my friends says, you got to embrace the suck. All right? So it's going to suck. You just got to embrace it. You just got to dive in. And so I'm pumping my muscles, and it's probably about 30 seconds through. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. My daughter's sitting up, and she's laughing at me, and so I'm like, this is great. So that is one way to create a stressor on your body that now actually stimulates adaptation. Your body has to adapt. Whenever there's stress, your body's got to adapt to it. And the way it's going to adapt to that, one of the benefits is it's going to release hormones okay, and heat shock proteins and all these cool things that will help you burn fat for fuel. So that may be another trigger that we need. Now, if somebody has adrenal fatigue, raise your hand if you've heard that term, okay? Or a disconnect between their brain and their adrenals, and they go ahead and they do a cold water shower, they may feel good initially, okay? But then later in the day, they're gonna crash. Too much stress, overwhelm their system, all right? So, for some people, this can be really beneficial. For other people, they may just start with 5 seconds of cold water, or 10 seconds, or something like that. So just a little bit, and then gradually bump up. Now, how many of you guys have heard of the thyroid gland and how important that is? Raise your hand. So probably everybody in here. How many of you guys know somebody that has a thyroid issue? Really common, in fact, the most underdiagnosed condition out there, and as a functional medicine practitioner, I see this all the time. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So these are certain signs of an underactive thyroid. They don't always mean you have an underactive thyroid. And actually, we really shouldn't say an underactive thyroid, because what I find is that most people, actually a thyroid gland itself is producing enough hormone, but they either have an autoimmune condition that's affecting the thyroid, or they're not converting the inactive form of thyroid hormone into the active form, which is T3. But these are common things that we'll see. And another one that's not on there is actually hair loss. And how many of you guys have heard somebody who said, I got on a ketogenic diet and started losing hair? Okay, so to me that's like red flag, red flag, red flag, gotta test thyroid, gotta test thyroid. I'm gonna show you in the next slide, not yet, how to test the thyroid, what labs need to be done. But you guys can also see there the elevated cholesterol. So a lot of times people go on a ketogenic diet, cholesterol goes up, LDL cholesterol, total cholesterol, and they're like, my cholesterol went up, you know, and they're really worried, and their medical doctor, of course, pen pad reflex, and they're giving them what? Yes, right, statin medication. However, we know that thyroid hormone, active T3, plays a big role with LDL receptor sensitivity. And so if the LDL receptor, kind of like insulin sensitivity, so if you don't have good sensitivity in that receptor, you need to produce more LDL. Does that make sense? Because LDL is important. It brings, you know, fat-soluble vitamin A, vitamin D, all these key nutrients to the, it's a boat, right? It's like literally carrying all your precious cargo to the cell. It's really, really important. So if you don't have good sensitivity in that LDL receptor, you're not getting those valuable nutrients into the cell. So now the body's like, well, I gotta produce more of these. I need more boats out there because I gotta get this precious cargo, you know, to dock. And so the thyroid hormone, this is so common, cholesterol goes up, they don't have good thyroid hormone expression, okay? So let's go to the next slide there. These are the key labs, okay? These are the labs that need to be looked at. So a lot of times doctors are just looking at TSH, which is actually a brain hormone. It's not even a thyroid. It's a hormone the brain tells the thyroid to produce thyroid hormone. And then sometimes they'll test T4, which is your inactive form of thyroid hormone, but the thyroid, 93% of what the thyroid produces is inactive. It's T4. The body has then got to convert it into T3. Now there's also these binding globulins that can come around and bind to your thyroid hormone, okay? Especially, anybody heard of like estrogen dominance? Okay, so when somebody has too much estrogen in their body, typically because of insulin resistance, but oftentimes when they have that, they can't convert. They have too much binding globulins that grab the T3. Okay, we got plenty of time here. I'm almost finished, and I got 10 minutes left. And good time for Q&A. This is great, and I can take some time on this. You guys good? Everything going good? Okay, good. All right, so anyways, there's all these different factors. Reverse T3. How many of you guys have heard of that? Reverse T3. Okay, so if somebody has elevated cortisol, who's heard of cortisol? It's stress hormone. They might have high reverse T3. So when I look at that on a lab, I typically think, unless they're like overwhelmed by stress in their life, maybe they're going through a divorce or bankruptcy or something, I typically think, if it's not something like that, chronic infection. They might have a chronic infection. And so what if they had a chronic Epstein-Barr virus infection, right? Or a parasite or something like that. That could be driving up that reverse T3, making them feel awful, and then they're going to say, well, it's a ketogenic diet. I started losing my hair. Keto's terrible. No. We got to address the infection, support your immune system, and it may have been too stressful. This diet change may have been too stressful for you too quickly. These are things we need to look at. Okay, vitamin D. Why aren't they testing vitamin D? Vitamin D is so important. How many of you guys ever had a vitamin D test? And how many guys were low in vitamin D, right? Most people are. And so, it's interesting because my wife is real, she goes out, she never sunburns. She's white, but she gets really, really dark and sunburns. For me, I get sunburned if I'm in the sun for like more than 45 minutes. So years ago, we got married in 2015, and on our honeymoon, we went to Mexico, and she was like out just sunbathing the whole time. And then for me, I got sunburnt the first day, and then after that, I was pretty much trying to reduce my sun exposure. Well, we both got labs done like 2 weeks after, and my vitamin D was 80 nanograms per milliliter, which is like awesome, really ideal. Now, let me just give you guys the marker that doctors are going to look for, medical doctors typically, is 30. If you're under 30, they're going to say you're deficient. And the big thing for them is they think, well, you're at risk for osteoporosis or osteomalacia or some sort of a bone density issue. But we know that vitamin D plays a huge role in your immune function and your ability to have enough T regulatory cells so we can balance out inflammation, prevent autoimmune conditions, help your body to have a strong enough immune function too to help kill off cancer cells and things like that. So very, very important. My wife, her levels were 38. So she's somebody who loves to sunbathe, loves to get in the sun, all right? But what I found is that she actually had a vitamin D gene receptor mutation where she actually needs more sun, more vitamin D supplementation in order to get her levels to where they should be. Whereas for me, I don't, so I can go out in the sun. We actually have one of these cool vitamin D tanning beds at my house, which is really cool. Dr. Mercola used to sell them. Anybody heard of Dr. Mercola? Yeah, he told me, I spoke at a conference with him a year or two ago, and he told me that he actually got a $5 million lawsuit for selling vitamin D tanning beds. Can you believe that? Can't sell them anymore. But anyways, vitamin D supplementation, very, very inexpensive, okay? It can make a huge difference in your life and your health. Now, fasting insulin, Amy was talking about that. That should be tested, So when we're looking at all this stuff, we should definitely be testing fasting insulin. And so for some people this is rare, okay, but with some people with thyroid issues, their fasting insulin is actually too low. These are the people that do better with like some carb ups because their insulin's too low. Insulin actually plays a role with, this is one of the good things insulin does, helps convert T4 to T3. So if we suppress that insulin too much, we might not get the right conversion there. So usually the Goldilocks, the ideal optimal zone for your insulin, fasting insulin, is going to be between 2 and 5. It's under 2 or it's trending in that area and somebody has, this is fasting insulin, of course. And so if it's trending down around 2 and somebody's having more of these sort of thyroid symptoms, then I might have them add in some carbs in the evening once a week or twice a week or every other day, or try to find the right rhythm. These are people that are more insulin sensitive. Good for them. That 20% I think that you showed on that chart. And so great for them, and they just may need that. Of course, we want to do it with real foods, and so that's a key thing to be looking at. Iron panel. I think that's really huge. Sometimes people are anemic, they have an H. pylori infection or something like that, parasite, and they're anemic. And they're not absorbing, even though they're eating red meat, they're not absorbing the iron. So I see that often. So anyways, this is just a whole group of labs right here that if you take a picture of that and bring that into your doctor and say, hey, it's time for our regular blood work. I don't want just the regular complete blood count and everything's great. You can go home and continue to feel bad. I'd rather get all of these tests right here. Can you please run all of these tests? And they may do it, okay? And typically all of these tests can be run, and oftentimes insurance will pay for that, okay? So you could just talk to them, especially if you have a medical condition. They may pay for it. Sometimes you'll get the response that they are not going to run it. And some doctors are a little bit concerned that the insurance company is not going to pay. And if you get all of these done and they don't pay, I mean, they're going to bill the insurance like, I don't know, $3,000 for all these labs. You can purchase this whole package for like $300 off my website. Complete thyroid, we call it. So cash rates are a lot lower. So if you can't get it run, you can go ahead and of course order it. And I have nutritionists, I have a coaching team that can help you guys as well. And then go ahead and go to the next slide. I also am local, so I have a clinic in Kennesaw, Georgia. So it took me about, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour to get out here. Now, that's a Saturday morning. If I tried to do this, come out here on a Friday or a Thursday, it would have been like, I don't know, 5 hours, whatever, it depends. I gotta come down 75, that's just crazy. Okay, but if you want nutrition coaching, things like that, you might do like a monthly appointment or appointment every 3 to 6 months, so it's doable. Okay, I've got a great team, great chiropractor, Dr. Audrey, and then great nutrition health coach, Melissa, and I am still in my clinic seeing patients at this time, so we're here to help. You can also go to my website, drjockers.com, get over 1 million unique visitors. Isn't that amazing? Just, started it, just trying to get this information out, but it's really grown, it's been a blessing, and we have a lot of free gifts that can help you out there as well. Okay, so how much time do I have? What, 2 minutes? 2 minutes? All right, guys, well, hopefully that was helpful, and if you have questions, I'm gonna be hanging around for just a little bit, but I will be leaving a little bit early because I can't let my wife, our nanny couldn't work today, and I can't let my wife have all 3 kids. She's gonna be really mad at me if she's gotta have all 3 kids all day long, so can't let that happen. All right, thanks so much.